Okay, in this video, I'll show you how to make a cool timer app like this. The cool thing is, let's say if you set it for 70 minutes, it'll automatically know that's 1 hour and 10 minutes. Okay. So you can also pause, you can reset, and you can resume. So let's get started. In HTML, all I have is a main tag with 3 input tags and a button with an on click. And I'm passing in the values from these IDs like this. In JavaScript, here's a very basic template. I just have height, display, and place content in the center so we can get everything looking kind of nice without having to make a CSS file. And then I selected the main div, and then temp is holding all of these HTML tags as strings, because later on, once the timer's done, we're going to put back the HTML that we saved here in the temp. My interval is null, and then later this will become set interval. So here's our function, right? And this was the on click. So what do we want to do first? Well, whenever they click, we want to change the inner HTML to have the hours, minutes, and seconds that was passed in from the arguments. So just with this, if we pass in 5 for hours, 2 for minutes, and 3 for seconds, and we click start, we see that we do get those values, but the seconds are not counting down. So how do we get the seconds to start counting down? Well, that's going to involve changing my interval to a set interval, right? Now, instead of just defining it, I will create a function and I'll call this, let's call it start interval, like this. And then down here in the global scope, I will now create this function start interval. Okay, so now this needs to return a set interval because my interval needs to be assigned to a set interval. And when you do a function call like this, the value of my interval will be the return statement. Okay, so we need to explicitly say return set interval. And I use an arrow function, and we want this to run every 1 second or every 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, and then every 1 second, we're gonna decrease the seconds that the user had. Now, if you look here, I gave this h1 an ID of sec counter. And since, remember I said, JavaScript saves all HTML IDs that doesn't have spaces or dashes. So now you can simply do sec counter dot text content minus minus. Yeah. And even though text content is a string, the minus minus operator will actually convert it to a number and then decrement it and then re-render it for you. So let's start with 1, 2, and 3. Now you're going to see that the seconds are going down, but now we're going into the negatives. So we have to fix that. Okay, so our problem is whenever we get to 0 for our seconds counter, we go into the negatives. So would it before we minus it, we check if it's equal to 0. Right? But before that, let me define some variables. Let me paste it in. So here, I'm just getting the values from their text content. So now right here, we can say, hey, if seconds is double equals to 0, then what are we going to do? Well, when the seconds is 0, I think it's best to check if the minutes are also 0 and the hours are also 0, because that's when we know we're done with the timer. So inside, I'm going to nest another if minutes is equal to 0, and if hours are equal to 0, then let's just alert that we're done. And then let's just clear interval, my interval, and then we can do main div dot inner HTML will be equal to the temp string that we saved earlier, right? And then we're gonna return. Okay, so now let's do 0, 0, and 3 seconds. 2, 1, we're going to see that we're done. And then when we click OK, our timer reset it. And now we can set a new timer if we wanted to for 1 second. It's done and it resets again. Okay, so when seconds are 0 and minutes and hours are 0, we're done and we exit out of the function. Now, if seconds is 0 and we're not done, that means we need to take our seconds counter's text content. So I'll put this below this if statement here, and we're going to decrease it by 1. Okay, now inside here, we need to do another if statement. So now we're going to check, hey, when seconds are 0, we're going to check if minutes are 0. Okay. Now this is actually the same as also checking if hours are not 0, right? But we don't need to do that because before this, we have a return statement that already checks for that. So inside if minutes equal to 0, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to set the minutes.text content to 59, right? Because we cannot have more than 59 minutes. And then we can do else. Else means, hey, if minutes is not 0, then we can do minutes.text content minus minus. Now inside when minutes is equal to 0 and we change it to 59, we also have to remember that we need to change the hour counter's text content as well to minus minus. And I think this should go first. Okay, good. Now let's say if we have 1 hour, 0 minutes, and 3 seconds, and I click start, 2, 1, 0, we see that the hours change, the minutes, oh, and we still have our seconds here. Oh, that's because our seconds text content here should be equal to 60. So let's try that again. 1, 0, and 2, 0, and there we go. Now everything works nicely. Now, one problem is that, let's say if we put something like 77 minutes, we get 77 minutes, but the countdown will not be correct. So let's make it actually correct. So let me just paste this in. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking all of these arguments that we receive. I'm going to get the absolute values, and then I'm going to round it off with a double tilde operator. And for positive numbers, the double tilde works exactly the same as math.floor. Okay. So this prevents them from using decimals and from using negative numbers. And then here, if they input seconds that's bigger than 59, right, we're going to push that extra stuff into the minutes, right? So let's say 70 seconds becomes 1 minute, and then the remainder becomes the leftover 10 seconds, right? And then after we check for seconds greater than 59, we can now check to see, hey, did this one push any of the minutes to be over 59 minutes? And if it did, we'll calculate the difference, and we're going to add that difference to the hours, and then our minutes will become the remainder on line 25 here. Okay. So then after all that, we're going to render our newly calculated hours, minutes, and seconds. So let's say if we put 70 minutes now, we get 1 hour and 10 minutes. And yes, we can do more than one field. If we do 70 minutes and 70 seconds, it knows that's 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 10 seconds. Cool, right? Okay, let's add the pause, resume, and reset buttons. I'm going to replace our main div.innerHTML. So now we have 2 extra buttons. Let me set random times. See, pause and reset, but right now they don't work. So here, since I gave it an ID, I can do pause button dot on click is equal to, oh, not fuck, function. And then here, I can use the this keyword to do an if check. So if this dot text content is triple equal to pause, which is what we initially gave it. So if it's equal to that, that means we want to pause. So clear interval, which interval? My interval, right? And then now we're going to change the buttons. So this dot text content is now going to be equal to, let's say, resume. Okay. So else means the text content was resumed already. Okay. So then now we need to start our interval again. So now we can have my interval is equal to start interval right here. Okay. And then after that, we do the this.text content is now equal to pause again. Okay, so let's set this to 33 seconds. We see that it's counting down. I pause at 30 seconds. I resume, it starts counting down again. And then if I reset, oh, nothing's happening because we haven't done that yet. So let's do that real fast. So reset. Reset is actually really easy. So reset btn.onClick is equal to function. And now all I need to do is clear the interval, my interval, and then I can do main div.innerHTML is equal to temp like this. Okay. So 31 seconds, I can pause at 30 seconds, and then when I reset, we go back. Okay. Okay, so let's test our timer. If we don't put anything for hour, minutes, and seconds, and we do like 3 seconds, it counts down. We can pause at 1 second. We can resume. It tells us that we're done. We click OK. It starts over. We don't put anything for hours, or we can put 0. Let's do 0 hours. 1 minute and 2 seconds. 2 seconds, 1 second. We see that the minutes go to 0 and the seconds go back to 59. Okay. We can still pause. We can still resume. We can still reset. And I think that's it.